A woman will never walk up to you and say, "Hey, I'm attracted to you, please make a move." That's not how it works. Instead, she'll do something far more subtle. She'll touch something, and if you don't know what that something is, congratulations. You just missed your moment, and she's already shifted her attention to someone who understood the language you didn't even realize was being spoken. Here's where this becomes a little uncomfortable, but also incredibly powerful for you to understand. According to research published in the Journal of Nonverbal Behavior, over 90% of emotional communication between two people happens without a single word being spoken. Just think about that for a moment. The most important conversation she is having with you isn't coming out of her mouth, it's happening through her body, her gestures, her micro movements, especially through her hands. And if you're being honest with yourself, no one ever really taught you how to read that language, did they? You were told to listen to words, to look for obvious signs, to wait for clarity, but attraction doesn't work that way. It's quiet, layered, and often disguised in behaviors that seem ordinary on the surface, but carry deep psychological meaning underneath. So if you've ever walked away from an interaction wondering, was she interested or was she just being nice? You're not alone, but more importantly, you're not stuck there anymore. Today, we're going to gently but honestly open your eyes to a form of communication that has always been there. You just weren't trained to see it. And once you begin to recognize it, something fascinating happens. You stop second guessing. You stop overthinking. And instead, you begin to feel the interaction in a completely different way. Let me speak to you directly for a moment. If you're someone who has ever felt confused in conversations with women, if you've ever replayed moments in your mind thinking, "I should have said something, I should have done something," then what you're about to understand today may quietly change the way you experience connection for the rest of your life, not because you're learning tricks, but because you're finally learning awareness. And awareness when it comes to human behavior is everything. Now, before we go deeper, there's something important I want you to hold in the back of your mind as you listen. Not every gesture means attraction in isolation. Context matters. Emotional tone matters. Patterns matter. What we're exploring today is not about jumping to conclusions. It's about recognizing consistent signals that align with genuine interest. That distinction alone will set you apart from most people who misrate situations entirely. And there's one particular behavior, the last one we'll explore later in this conversation, that most men misunderstand completely. In fact, they often interpret it as disinterest, when in reality it can signal something much deeper, something more emotionally engaged. So as you listen, stay present, stay curious, because that one detail alone has changed the way many people reinterpret past interactions. Now, let's begin with something that seems obvious on the surface, but is far more nuanced than most people realize. When a woman is attracted to you, one of the first places that subtle energy often shows up is in her hair. And I know what you might be thinking. That's basic. Everyone knows that. But what most people don't understand is the world of difference between someone casually moving their hair out of their face because it's in the way and someone repeatedly engaging with their hair while they're focused on you. When attraction is present, the brain releases chemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine. These create a kind of internal restlessness, a heightened awareness, a subtle nervous energy that needs an outlet. And very often that outlet becomes the hands. The hair becomes something to touch, to twist, to adjust, not because she's thinking, "Let me play with my hair now," but because her body is responding before her conscious mind even catches up. You might notice her slowly pulling her hair to one side, exposing her neck without realizing it, or gently wrapping a strand around her finger while maintaining eye contact. These are not random movements, they are part of a deeply ingrained behavioral pattern tied to attraction. Now, here's where your awareness becomes important. One movement doesn't mean much, but repetition, rhythm, timing, those are your clues. If her attention stays on you while these gestures continue, that's when it shifts from coincidence to communication. And as we naturally move from the hair, we arrive at something even more revealing, the neck. When a woman lightly touches her neck or traces along her collarbone while speaking with you, something quite profound is happening. Beneath the surface, the neck is one of the most vulnerable areas of the human body. From an evolutionary perspective, exposing or drawing attention to it signals trust. It's a quiet way of saying, I feel safe here. Safety and attraction are deeply connected. Without a sense of safety, true attraction rarely develops in a meaningful way. So when you notice this gesture, it's not just about physical awareness. It's about emotional openness. And what's fascinating is that this often happens without conscious intention. Many women don't even realize they're doing it until the moment has passed. I remember speaking with someone who once told me about a conversation she had at a small gathering. She didn't think much of it at the time, but later when reflecting, she realized she had been gently touching her neck throughout the entire interaction. That's how subtle and honest the body can be. Now, let's shift your attention slightly upward to one of the most expressive and revealing areas of the face, the lips. When a woman lightly touches her lips, presses a finger near them, or even applies lip balm while maintaining a certain kind of eye contact, it's not just a casual act of grooming. It's an unconscious way of drawing attention to a feature that humans are naturally wired to notice. There's something deeply instinctual about this. So when this gesture appears in the context of connection, when it's paired with engagement, presence, and subtle emotional warmth, it becomes something more than just habit. It becomes emphasis, a quiet spotlight, a moment of notice. And here's where I want you to pause and reflect for just a second. How many times in your life have you been in conversations where these small details were present, but you dismissed them as nothing? Not because you weren't capable of seeing them, but because no one ever explained what they might mean. That's the gap we're closing today. If this is already starting to shift your perspective, take a moment and let me know in the comments. When you articulate something, even briefly, it begins to integrate on a deeper level. Now, as the internal emotional energy builds, it often needs more outlets. And one of the most overlooked ways this shows up is through objects, especially personal items like jewelry. When a woman starts fidgeting with her necklace, adjusting a ring, or gently playing with an earring while engaged in conversation with you, it's often a form of what psychologists call a displacement behavior. This doesn't mean discomfort in a negative sense. It often reflects heightened emotional stimulation, a mix of excitement, curiosity, and yes, attraction. The body seeks a way to regulate that energy, and the hands become the tool. The jewelry becomes the focus point. Imagine holding a small object while you're thinking deeply or feeling slightly nervous. You might rotate it, tap it, adjust it without even realizing. Now, layer attraction into that emotional state, and the behavior becomes even more pronounced. There's also an interesting directional aspect to this. If her attention keeps returning to an area near her neckline while maintaining connection with you, it's not random. It's subtle guidance, not forced, not exaggerated, just present enough to be noticed by someone who is paying attention. And this is where things begin to shift from internal signals to external ones, from self-touching to actual physical contact. Because once a woman crosses that invisible boundary and reaches out to touch you, even briefly, something important has changed in the dynamic. We'll explore that transition more deeply next, because this is the point where many men hesitate, freeze, or completely misread the moment, and that hesitate often determines whether the connection grows or quietly fades away. When that moment comes and she reaches out to touch your arm, your shoulder, or even your hand during a conversation, something very real has just shifted between the two of you. This is no longer just internal signaling or subtle self-expression. This is direct communication. And what makes it so powerful is that physical touch, even the briefest kind, crosses a social boundary that most people don't step over unless they feel a certain level of comfort and interest. Think about it for a second. We don't casually touch people we feel indifferent about. There's always intention behind it, even if that intention isn't fully conscious. When she touches you, she is not only expressing interest, she is also testing connection. She's asking without words, how do you respond to me? Do you feel this too? And here is where so many men unintentionally lose momentum. They freeze, they overthink, or worse, they ignore the moment entirely as if it didn't happen. But from her perspective, that small gesture carried emotional weight. It required a tiny bit of courage, a tiny bit of vulnerability. And when it's not acknowledged, it can feel like the connection just. Imagine tossing a ball gently to someone, expecting them to catch it, and instead it just hits them and falls to the ground. That's often what it feels like when a touch goes unrecognized, not dramatic, not devastating, just quietly disappointing. Now, let me guide you here because this is where awareness turns into action. The response doesn't need to be exaggerated or overly confident, it just needs to be present. A slight lean in, a warm smile, even a subtle return touch. It's not about copying exactly what she did, it's about meeting her energy where it is. And when you do that, something remarkable happens. The interaction begins to feel mutual, balanced, alive. Now, let's move into something that most people would never think to notice, yet it reveals so much. Picture yourself sitting across from a woman at a cafe. Conversation is flowing, and then you notice what she's doing with her glass. She's slowly running her finger along the rim or tracing the edge of her cup, maybe gently sliding her fingers up and down the stem of a glass. On the surface, it seems like nothing, just idle movement. But psychologically, it's rarely just that. When emotional energy builds and can't yet be expressed directly, it often gets redirected. The object becomes a substitute, a stand-in for physical expression. In simple terms, the attention she wants to place on you is being channeled somewhere safe. And when this is paired with eye contact, with a soft smile, with presence, it becomes even more meaningful. It's not the glass itself, it's the rhythm, the timing. Now, I want you to reflect again. Have you ever been in a situation where everything felt good, but nothing happened, and later you wondered why it didn't go anywhere? Often it's because these quiet signals were present, but they weren't recognized or responded to. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And as we continue, you'll begin to notice that attraction isn't a single signal, it's a pattern. Now let's shift into another behavior. When a woman starts adjusting her clothing while she's around you, smoothing her top, straightening her sleeves, repositioning something that doesn't actually need fixing, she's engaging in something very old, very instinctual. This is presentation behavior. Across many species, including humans, it's not planned, it's not calculated, it's a biological response that says, I want to be perceived well by you. But here's the key detail: timing. If it begins after your interaction starts or becomes more frequent as the conversation deepens, that's where it becomes meaningful. That's where it becomes directed. She's not just existing in the space anymore, she's becoming aware of how she exists in your eyes. And there's something quietly beautiful about that. Now, as all of these signals build, we arrive at the signal that many men get completely wrong. I want you to really listen closely here. When a woman rests her chin on her hand, gently cradles her face, or touches her cheek while listening to you, the most common assumption is that she's bored. But in many cases, the opposite is true. What you're actually seeing is something called facial framing. It's a deeply human behavior where someone unconsciously draws attention to their face while they are emotionally engaged. It's soft, it's relaxed, it's open, and more importantly, it usually appears when someone feels comfortable enough to let their guard down. Think about the difference between someone who is disengaged and someone who is fully present. Disengagement often looks distant, distracted, disconnected, but this is stillness with focus. Her eyes remain on you. Her expression responds to what you're saying. There's warmth there, even if it's subtle. She's not pulling away, she's settling in. There was a moment someone once described to me that captures this perfectly. She said she found herself sitting across from a man, completely absorbed in the conversation. Without realizing it, she had rested her chin in her hand, leaning slightly forward, just listening. Not because she was tired, but because she felt safe enough to simply be there. That's what this gesture often represents. Not boredom, but ease. And when you begin to understand that, something shifts inside you. You stop misreading calmness as disinterest. You start recognizing the quiet forms of attraction that don't need to be loud to be real. Now, let me ask you something honestly. How many moments in your past might look different now through this lens? How many interactions where you assumed there was nothing there might have actually been filled with signals you just didn't know how to read? This is why awareness matters so much. Not to overanalyze every movement, but to notice patterns, to feel context, to respond with presence instead of hesitation. If this is opening your eyes even a little, take a second to engage with it. You don't have to overthink it, just acknowledge it, because the more you interact with what you're learning, the more natural it becomes in real life. And now, as everything we've talked about begins to come together, there's something deeper we need to understand. Because recognizing attraction is only one side of the experience. The other side is what you do with it. And this is where most people either step forward with quiet confidence or retreat into uncertainty and miss the moment entirely. We're going to move into that space next, where awareness turns into behavior and behavior turns into connection in a way that feels natural, respectful, and genuine. Now that you've begun to see these signals more clearly, something important needs to settle in your mind. Recognizing attraction is only half of the experience. The other half, the part that truly shapes the outcome, is how you respond in those moments. Because here's the truth that isn't talked about enough. A woman can show interest, she can give signals, she can even create opportunities, but she is still watching to see if you meet her halfway. Not aggressively, not awkwardly, but with presence, with awareness, with a sense that you understand what's happening between the lines. And if that response never comes, the energy fades. Not because she wasn't interested, but because connection requires movement from both sides. Let's slow this down and make it very real for you. Imagine you're in a conversation. She's playing with her hair. Her body is angled toward you. She's lightly touching her necklace, maybe even reaching out to touch your arm at one point. The signals are there, the atmosphere feels different, there's a softness, a tension, something unspoken but present. Now, in that exact moment, there are only two directions this can go. You either stay in your head or you gently step into the moment. And stepping into the moment doesn't mean saying something dramatic or bold. It's much simpler than that. It's about alignment. If she leans in slightly, you don't lean away. If she touches your arm, you don't freeze. If she holds eye contact a little longer than usual, you don't break it immediately out of nervousness. You stay with it. You allow the moment to exist without trying to control it. This is where many people get it wrong. They think attraction requires performance, but in reality, it requires awareness and permission. Permission to engage, permission to respond, permission to be present without overthinking every small detail. And let me give you something practical here, something you can actually use the next time you find yourself in one of these situations. When you notice consistent signals of attraction, don't rush, don't jump ahead. Instead, slightly deepen the interaction. That might look like asking a more personal question, not intrusive, just a little more meaningful. It might look like slowing your speech just a bit, creating space for connection instead of filling every second with words. It might look like holding eye contact just 1 second longer than feels comfortable and noticing how she responds. These are small shifts, but they change everything because what you're doing is moving from surface-level interaction into something more intentional. Now, I want to be very clear about something. None of this is about assumption or entitlement. Just because a woman shows one or two signals does not mean anything is guaranteed. Attraction is fluid, it can grow, it can fade, it can shift depending on how the interaction unfolds. What you're learning here is not how to get someone. You're learning how to recognize when interest is present and how to respond in a way that allows it to develop naturally. There's a difference between forcing a moment and meeting a moment, and people can feel that difference instantly. Let me share a simple scenario with you. A man and a woman are sitting across from each other talking. She's engaged, smiling, occasionally touching her hair. He notices, but instead of overanalyzing, he simply becomes a little more present. He mirrors her energy. When she laughs, he allows himself to laugh fully. When she touches his arm, he gently touches her back during a natural moment. Nothing exaggerated, nothing forced, and slowly the interaction shifts. It becomes warmer, more relaxed, more connected. Now imagine the opposite. The same signals are there, but he ignores them. He stays guarded. He keeps emotional distance. Eventually, the energy drops. She pulls back, not because she lost interest initially, but because it was never met. This is why awareness without action doesn't create connection. It just creates missed opportunities. And I want to ask you something honestly. Have you ever experienced that? A moment where looking back you realize something could have developed but didn't? Not because it wasn't there, but because it wasn't recognized in time. If that's the case, don't let that sit as regret. Let it become understanding. Because from this point forward, you're not the same version of yourself in those situations anymore. Now, let's go a little deeper into something that will help you navigate these moments with confidence. Emotional pacing. Attraction is not just about signals. It's about rhythm. Too fast and it feels overwhelming. Too slow and it fades. The key is to match the pace of the interaction. If her energy is light and playful, you stay there. If her energy becomes slightly more personal, you meet her there, not with interrogation, but with openness. This is what creates that feeling people often describe as it just flowed. Flow isn't accidental. It's created when two people are unconsciously matching each other's emotional rhythm. And here's something most people don't realize. When a woman is showing you these subtle signals, she's already adjusted her rhythm slightly toward you. She's already leaning in her own way. Your role is not to take over, it's to meet her there. Now there's another layer to this because it will protect you from making one of the most common mistakes. Not every friendly gesture is attraction. Some people are naturally expressive, some are warm, open, engaging with everyone. So, how do you tell the difference? Consistency and exclusivity. If the behaviors we've talked about are consistent throughout your interaction and they feel directed toward you specifically, that's when they carry meaning. But if you notice the same exact behavior with everyone around, in the same intensity, in the same way, then it's likely just part of her natural personality. This is why observation matters more than assumption. You're not looking for one sign, you're looking for patterns, and when those patterns are clear, something inside you will feel it. Not in an overwhelming way, but in a quiet sense of knowing. Now, attraction is not about decoding someone like a puzzle. It's about becoming aware enough to notice what's already being expressed and grounded enough to respond authentically. The goal is to create a moment where both people feel seen and understood. And when you approach it from that place, something changes. You stop chasing clarity and you start experiencing connection. If this is resonating with you, take a moment to engage with it. Even acknowledging it to yourself helps reinforce this awareness. Because what you're building here isn't just knowledge, it's perception. And perception shapes everything. Now, let's bring everything together in a way that feels natural, grounded, and actually usable in real life. Because everything you've understood so far only becomes valuable when it changes how you show up in the moment. When you begin to notice these signals, playing with hair, touching her neck, drawing attention to lips, you're seeing a pattern, a quiet buildup of emotional and physical cues that all point in the same direction. And your role is simple but important. You acknowledge it not with words but with presence. The more natural your response is, the more attractive it becomes. Because what she's really responding to is not what you say. It's how you make her feel in that moment. So instead of asking, "What should I do now?" I want you to shift that question slightly. Ask yourself, "How can I be more present right now?" That might mean slowing down just a little, letting the silence breathe instead of rushing to fill it, holding eye contact with calm confidence instead of looking away too quickly. Allowing yourself to smile when you feel it. Presence is felt, and when it's genuine, it creates a kind of emotional safety that allows attraction to grow naturally. Now, let me give you a simple way to respond. It's something I want you to remember. You match and then you slightly lead. Matching means you meet her energy where it is. If she's warm, you're warm. If she's playful, you're playful. And then you gently lead, not by forcing anything, but by deepening the interaction just a little. Share something more personal. It doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, the quieter it is, the more real it feels. Attraction grows in the spaces between words, in the pauses, in the eye contact, the shared understanding that something is happening without needing to say it out loud. When you stop trying to control those moments, you become much more grounded. That calm presence is something people are naturally drawn to. Now, one more layer. Awareness does not mean assumption. Even when signals are strong, you stay attentive to how she responds. Attraction is dynamic. It can deepen or it can shift. Emotional intelligence is recognizing those changes without forcing anything. This separates confidence from pressure. Confidence says, I'm open to it. Pressure says, I need this to go somewhere. People feel that difference instantly. So as you move forward, carry this mindset. You're simply becoming aware and choosing authenticity. Because when you do, something powerful happens. Your interactions begin to feel natural, almost effortless. That's where real connection lives. Now, a final thought. These signals are invitations, not guarantees, not obligations. Invitations, an invitation to engage. But like any invitation, it only matters if you accept it. The next time you're in conversation, pay attention to the pauses, notice the shift, and when you sense that quiet shift, don't hold back out of uncertainty. Meet it. She's already taken the first step. If this conversation helped you, take a moment to acknowledge that, share your thoughts or something you've noticed. If you want to continue exploring this, make sure you stay connected here. There's so much more to understand because at the end of the day, this isn't just about attraction. It's about understanding people. And once you truly understand, everything changes.